Hello, how are you? You've probably heard that fat is a villain, that fat clogs the heart, clogs the cells, and worsens insulin resistance. But in fact, there are 3 types of fat that can help fight insulin resistance, improve inflammation, help regulate glucose in your body. You're going to love this video. I'll explain what these 3 fats are, how to include them in your daily routine, and what precautions you should take. Stay until the end because you won't want to miss this. Before we start, I want to ask you, would you like to control your blood sugar and lose weight? Let me know down below. I'd love to see your comment. When we think about this issue of insulin resistance, it's worth understanding it a little better because actually insulin is a hormone that works like a little switch, you know? It opens the cell's door so that the glucose circulating in the plasma, in the blood, can enter. So it regulates the levels of sugar that are in the blood, circulating in the bloodstream. So when it works well, you eat, your glucose rises, insulin kicks in, is secreted by the pancreas, opens the cell door, the glucose enters, and everything is fine. The problem is when there is insulin resistance, because that lock starts to jam. The insulin is there, but it's as if it doesn't fit into the cell's door, and the cell can't open, so to speak. So the glucose stays in the blood longer, the body produces more insulin to try to counterbalance this, and the metabolism starts to become deregulated. In practice, this can show up as a very large belly that doesn't go down, that tiredness, that sleepiness after eating, feeling hungry soon after a meal, and a lot of difficulty losing weight. There is a concept that is very important, but I need to explain it to you. I'll try to do this simply, which is that when we have a high energy intake, especially with a lot of sugar, little physical activity, and an excess of calories, the body starts to accumulate fat where it shouldn't. And it's not just fat on the outside, it's fat that's inside the liver, inside the muscles, and this is called lipotoxicity. This fat that is accumulated outside of where it should be interferes with the functioning of the cell. And it's as if it were grease, dirt that's built up in your lock. The key tries to go in, which is kind of like insulin, but it can't fit properly because of this dirt and it doesn't work right. And the bigger problem isn't just the fat, it's the combination of the wrong kind of fat you consumed with refined sugar. So a classic example would be fast food, ultra-processed sweets, and foods loaded with trans fats, hydrogenated fats, and sugar. This mixture causes even more inflammation in the body and further increases insulin resistance. Of course, not all fats are the same, right? We know that trans fats, hydrogenated vegetable fats, omega-6 from those refined oils like canola and corn oil, those oils used for frying, and even excessive saturated fat can increase inflammation in our bodies. The first wonderful fat that can really help you is omega-9 fat, which is found in olive oil and avocados, for example. Omega-9 has an effect that few people understand, but it changes everything. It improves the quality of the cell membrane. Think of the cell as a little house, right? It has a wall, and in that wall there's a lock where insulin fits in. That wall is made of fat. The outer layer of our cell, which defines the cell, is a phospholipid bilayer. So it's a fatty lipid layer. Now imagine a wall that is very rigid, inflamed, hardened, and a wall that is flexible, malleable, and healthy. In the rigid wall, the lock doesn't fit properly. In the malleable, flexible wall, communication happens normally. So the type of fat you consume changes this outer membrane of your cell and alters this metabolic and hormonal signaling. Omega-9 actually makes this membrane more malleable, improves the functioning of the insulin receptor, and facilitates the entry of glucose right into the cell. But it doesn't stop there, because this type of healthy fat also acts on inflammation, helping to reduce chronic low-grade inflammatory signals and improving the entire metabolic environment. And there's another very interesting detail. Omega-9 helps reduce the accumulation of fat in the wrong places, like I mentioned before, such as the liver, lipotoxicity. So, in practice, this means a better response to insulin, more stable energy, and fewer spikes and drops in glucose. That's why dietary patterns rich in olive oil, like the Mediterranean diet, are so closely linked to improved glycemic control, better insulin resistance, and overall cardiovascular health. Our second wonderful fat is one of the most studied in nutrition, which is omega-3. Omega-3 is mainly found in fatty deep-sea fish such as sardines, salmon, tuna, herring, mackerel, but it's also present in precursors like chia seeds and flax seeds, which contain ALA, right, the precursors of omega-3. It acts directly at the root of insulin resistance problems, which is precisely low-grade chronic inflammation. We know that inflammation is silent, right? The person doesn't feel pain, but the body is constantly activated, and this interferes with insulin's action, like there's some noise in the communication. And omega-3 acts like a brake in this process because it reduces the amount of inflammatory substances, the inflammatory toxins, modulates more anti-inflammatory pathways in our body, and improves cellular functioning. And there's another very important point because it improves the functioning of the mitochondria, which are the powerhouses of our cells. When the mitochondria work well, the body uses fat better as an energy source, uses glucose more efficiently, and produces more energy. So when the body gets worse, when there's a decline in this energy optimization, in energy utilization, insulin resistance also gets worse. In addition, omega-3 helps the liver avoid accumulating fat, and less fat in the liver leads to better glucose control, right? We know that everything is interconnected. In practice, we can end up having less inflammation, better metabolism, and improved insulin response. That's why it is so strategic and so widely used. As I mentioned, you can use fish, seeds, or even omega-3 supplements. They are being used more and more frequently. There's also another type of fat, which is MCT, a fat found in coconut and coconut oil that behaves in a very unique way in our body, very different from others. Most of the fats you consume need to go through a very slow process, involving digestion, absorption, transport, storage. But MCTs, which are medium-chain fatty acids, do not. They go straight to the liver and are quickly converted into energy. So think of it as an immediate use fuel, which ends up bringing some very interesting effects to our body, such as a lower chance of actually being stored as body fat, less formation of lipotoxicity, which is the accumulation of fat in places where it shouldn't accumulate, and less negative interference with insulin action. In addition, it can help the body go back to using fat as an energy source. This is very important for people who have insulin resistance, who end up losing this ability a little bit. The body ends up getting too stuck on using glucose, and then this medium-chain triglyceride helps to restore that metabolic flexibility. But there needs to be a balance, because it's not a magic fat. It's a fat for you to use as a replacement for other fats, not in addition to them. Actually, all these healthy fats I mentioned to you are calorie dense, right? We know that 1 gram of fat has 9 calories. So it's not like you should say olive oil, avocado, fatty fish, coconut oil are healthier for my insulin resistance. I'm going to eat them all the time. It's not like that. You should replace those other fats with these, but actually you need to watch the amount because any fat in excess can lead to weight gain. And weight, when you're overweight or obese, can also be a risk factor for insulin resistance. Remember I told you earlier about that bad combination, right? The sugar combined with low-quality fats or refined flour, ultra-processed foods. This can worsen the health of your liver, your body, or increase insulin resistance overall. So in addition to adding these healthy fats, ideally, you should also reduce trans fats in your diet, for example. Trans fat is a fat that has been industrially modified. It was created by humans and it enters the cell membrane and worsens the quality of that membrane. Remember that insulin needs to communicate with the cell. So when the membrane becomes too rigid, it gets more inflamed and less functional. And that's exactly what trans fat does. It plasticizes this cell membrane. So it really is very pro-inflammatory and should be completely avoided, right? As much as possible. Ultra-processed foods don't just contain trans fat, right? We know they're a mix, often of fat, but also sugar, refined flour, salt, additives, preservatives, colorants. So the food becomes hyper-palatable, and the tendency is that you eat much more than you would actually need at that moment. So all of this ends up being harmful. Of course, it's very important for us to think about adding good fats, but controlling bad fats is also fundamental to prevent insulin resistance. Controlling weight is also fundamental for us to improve insulin resistance, improve carbohydrate metabolism by eating plenty of fiber, protein, and healthy foods, right? With healthy fats, which will help create a more favorable metabolic environment to control blood sugar, improve insulin resistance, and reduce this low-grade chronic inflammation in our bodies. I want to know from you, did you already have the habit of consuming these healthy fats, and which ones do you consume? Because I know that some are easier than others, right? But remember that olive oil doesn't have to be used in excess. Some people say, olive oil is very expensive, but you can drizzle a little olive oil over your salad to get the benefits. And fish, you can use canned options. Canned tuna and sardines are good quality foods and can be part of your daily routine. So, by making the best choices, we can add these foods in a more economical way to make this feasible in our daily lives. Tell me, which of these healthy fats have you already consumed or are you going to start consuming? I would love to see your comment. Remember to like the video, it's really important to me. And also to share it with anyone who needs this information, anyone who would like it. Let's expand our chain of kindness, that's what I want with the channel. See you next time, bye.